Hello and welcome to the next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So, Graham, an Australian guest, and we're talking about sales.
Oh, two favourite subjects from my point of view. We have, she fashions herself as the sales doctor. She's wearing a white rose of Yorkshire because, she's really special and she thinks through what would influence people. It's Ingrid Maynard from all the way from Australia. Ingrid, welcome to the next 100 Days podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, what part of Australia are you talking to us from?
So I'm in Melbourne in Victoria, and we've had a heat wave at the moment. So it's about 38 degrees still. Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's nothing like that over here, but I have to say it's
the grey February gloom of the northeast of England.
It looks that way. But 38 degrees, that's quite warm, isn't it?
It's very warm, very, very hot indeed. Yep.
But my understanding of Australian, shall we say, politics or things that are going on there is that they're trying to encourage you to get into electric cars at the expense of cars that Australians actually want to drive.
Oh my goodness! Yeah,
it's probably a touchy subject, but I don't know. I mean, do you meet many people who are a bit hacked off that you can't drive? What is it called, a Ute or something like that? Is it these trucks that people drive in Australia?
Oh, Ute, a Ute,
a huge. It's just called a huge, like a huge.
No,
car.
a Ute. A Ute. Is that what you're talking about? A Ute?
Yeah. I'd heard that. I'd heard that word, but I didn't quite know what it meant.
It's short for utility vehicles. So a lot of tradespeople wear them, but they're putting taxes on a lot of the cars that will now, like new cars that will, kind of affect that whole segment of our economy, which is huge here in Australia.
Yeah. It's such a big country. You'd want a big car. I mean, I don't get it myself, but anyway. But the other thing is that if you had the responsibility of going into one of those big truck sales organizations, what on earth would you be telling them to do?
What on earth would I be telling them to do? I'd be telling them to really look after their customers, especially their business customers, because they're the ones that, continue to get their cars serviced. They're the ones that really go to them for advice. They're the repeat lifetime value kind of clients. So, and that's when you say that, those decisions that are made by government have massive flow-on effect. So the immediate thought, as we all did here, was, go straight to the tradespeople or straight to the business people that drive those sorts of vehicles.
Yeah.
But actually the flow-on is significant. So you think about, the dealerships that then have to sell at a higher price tag. So they're really selling on value. They've got to try and find another angle for those buyers to find value. And we're talking significant increases. We're talking about $7,000 on top of what the normal recommended retail price is for those vehicles. And then you've got, the ongoing servicing as well, that I suspect will probably also go up to discourage people to buy those vehicles as well.
I mean, I do have, Kevin knows this, I do have a Tesla, but that was made on the basis that I'm from Yorkshire. And I had a Scottish mother, and so basically, tight with my money, and long pocket, short arms. But the point of it is that it actually saves me money driving it around. Now that there are ups and downs with it, but having said that, I'm not in favour of actually penalising anybody. If you want to drive a combustion engine car, go ahead, do it. Why not? But at the end of the day, the thing is, in Australia, you're responsible, apparently, for about 1% of, the carbon that goes into the air. And, China's responsible for 30%. Well, get their house in order first, and then maybe come and have a look at Australia and the UK and others. But
yeah, well, on top of that too, Graham, so last week? The other week anyway, we had a complete power outage in Victoria where, we had a couple of days of this kind of degree heat. So they said that the grid was overloaded and the power went out in some areas for 2 days. So no electricity. And I just thought, that's interesting. Imagine if we have a future where everything's electric and this happens, and they're saying that these outages, the increased temperatures are going to be a thing of the future because of climate change. If that's true, then we can expect more of these. And if that's true, why are we really putting all of our eggs in one basket?
Well, we'll change gears in a minute, but just a revelation that I want to share with the world is that climate change is an absolute hoax. So basically, don't worry about it. You'll be all right for the next 500 years, and go and dig some coal out. But anyway,
I love how controversial this is already. We've just lit a fire and we've thrown a couple of cans of petrol in there. It's good.
But at the end of the day, prove me wrong. I think that's the point. Is that there's anyway, bye. Let's. I had this looking at your website. You have a brilliant part of it where it talks about off-the-shelf programs fall short, and you don't do off-the-shelf. You're a bespoke girl. So basically, what I don't know what an off-the-shelf sales program is. I wouldn't even have a clue what that is as an ex-sales guy. I wouldn't really understand what that is. What are you fighting against?
Yeah, so if you were from the States, you'd absolutely understand that, because most of those programs are really built around somebody's methodology that they developed once. It's great for the person that developed it because they get to do the work once, get paid forever. It's a great model. And look, hat off to them. The problem with those off-the-shelf programs is that it expects the client to really shoehorn themselves into that methodology rather than it being fit for purpose for the organization and the context within within which they're operating. So my programs are, for the most part, I do have one online program now that is a modular program, but for the most part, for the last 10 years, the way that I've always worked is I've gone into an organization. It's not that it's broken, but they're looking for the next gear. They're looking for the next horizon and how they're going to get there. So predominantly B2B organizations or Salesforce, and we talk about, okay, so where do we need to get to by when? And then I do a deep dive on the current context. So that's really around where they're at the moment, how people are performing, what their competitors are doing, what their customers are needing, what the market's doing, what they've done in the past that's worked. And then I put together what I believe is the right program for them that's geared all around behavioral change. And then I supplement that with bespoke templates and tools that fit into what what their existing sales.
Is that down to an individual? I mean, if you've got a sales force of 50, I mean, it's not tailored for each person, or is it?
Oh no, no, it's tailored for the organization and the team.
Got you.
Yeah.
Because collectively they've got themselves into this situation. So I guess, So the people asking you to come in are probably running the sales teams.
For the most part, it usually comes from either a director of sales or a head of sales. Sometimes, though, I can be called in from a managing director's remit, or I can come in through learning and development. So they often have the spend or the budget. It really depends on the structure of the business and how funds are allocated for the type of work that I do.
Right.
But usually, the people that have the need are the people who are heading up those sales teams, and they can identify that there's a need there. Yeah.
Presumably.
Sorry, professionals, Ingrid. Why do they need outside advice? Why don't they know what to do themselves?
It's not, sometimes, Kevin, as you know, it's not that they don't necessarily know what to do, but like children don't always listen to their parents. Parents can say something, ad nauseum, and then a stranger will come in and say the same thing. And, then the child goes, oh, I'm going to do that. And the parent's thinking, gosh, I've been saying that for years. It can often be that similar, but also there adds some extra validation to some of the perspectives that the internal person has. So it adds extra weight when someone from the outside who deals across multiple industries, multiple types of situations and contexts comes in and says, actually, that person's right for these reasons. And if you don't do anything about it, this is what I know for sure is likely to happen or not happen.
If you had to sort of on three fingers, say the typical problems that you face when you kind of wander into their organizations. I'm not saying that you'd wander, and you'd probably go in with a purpose, like Beth off Yellowstone. I mean, you'd be like her, wouldn't you?
With a
You
big
kind of
word
look
like
like her.
that, Graham,
You
you're
do
not
look
going to be wandering anyway. You're going to be noticed and doing it deliberately.
the episode that I'm watching at the moment, she's got a scar right down her face, but she's still incredibly attractive.
I'm
Apparently,
hiding my scar with the Rosetta.
whether we established that earlier, didn't we? So no, if you went into into these organisations, what are the kind of three big? You see them time and time again. Is there a kind of a top one, or is the three that are typical?
Well, the big one
you face?
they've got a massive sales target ahead of them, and they're not going to be able to get there. So if they continue on doing what they've been doing, they'll probably get the same or very similar results. But what I'm finding at the moment, one of the challenges is that not only do businesses have a much higher target to achieve this year, or going into the new financial year, and in Australia that's July onwards. That's our new financial year. Not only do they have a higher target, but we've got a really tough market. So we've got a situation where we've got a number of different things going on, and I'm not saying that's not the case in the UK as well, but you've got the perfect storm. You've got salespeople and sales leaders for that matter, who for the most part have had incredibly favourable economic conditions for the last 27 years in this country. I mean, we've had one downturn, I think, in that time period. And so most of them have sold in spite of themselves, not because of themselves, but they've thought that they had the skills in order to arm themselves with what they need now. And they're quickly realising they don't. Not only do the salespeople not have the skills, but the sales leaders have never led a team in these sorts of conditions. So that's number one.
Right.
Number two is that because they don't have that skill set, they've become, or they haven't needed to have that skill set, they've become order takers. So they've gone into an organisation, really expected the customer to know everything and to be able to tell them what they need. And then they'll be very pleasant about it. They'll be very professional about it. They'll put together exactly what the customer's told them they need and give it to them. And now they're not understanding why that's not enough. Or you've got account managers who are glorified customer service agents. And so, again, don't really understand that it's an active growth role where they need to not only identify new opportunities with existing customers to generate growth, and they don't also understand the role of retention within that. So they think that it's just about being nice and being, of service to them, which is great. And I would never argue that that's not a goal. Yeah. However, when you're trying to generate the kinds of targets that the businesses that I work with are trying to generate based on even skills from 2 years ago, it's not going to be enough. And then you've got those two issues on the sales front. Then on the customer side, you've got people that are making buying decisions who have more scrutiny on them than ever before. So if they get it wrong, there's more at stake. They're eating into any kind of discretionary budget that they may have set aside for, what my clients are offering. And if they get it wrong, it's gone, and that has great impact. Their treasure chests have all been eroded because of COVID and all of the, the lockdowns and the flow-on impact that had for a lot of businesses. So the treasure chests are gone, the discretionary spend's tighter, the overview or oversight on any kind of spend is higher. There's a greater risk there. And they're operating in conditions where, they're just the cost of running a business are astronomical. So you've got the cost of talent, which has gone through the roof over the last few years here, especially because we can't even get warm bodies, let alone people that have got the right skill sets. And second of all, if you do get them, then the person with the deepest pockets poaches them and grabs them. So you've got that issue. So they're scant on people resources. In terms of, again, running a business, you've got high costs of inflation. In this country, we've had 13 consecutive interest rate rises in a row. I think our inflation rate's up to about 8%, and then you've got the cost of other things of running a business. And when we talked about vehicles before, if you've got people in cars, then that's another expense as well. You've got higher petrol costs, you've got higher cost of purchasing vehicles, higher costs on the road. So people really, this is right for what I call a sales revolution, but we really need to be thinking about how we generate revenue and profit in a completely refreshed way, in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a heck of a lot there, Kevin.
Yes, sorry, it's not a simple answer.
No,
yeah.
No, I thought we were going to get ready to close the podcast at that point. You've been going on for so long.
No, I think that what we're talking about there, Graham, is very typical to what is going on here in the UK, in Europe.
Right. No, that's right.
We've been told just in the last couple of weeks that we've gone into a technical recession in the UK.
Right. Interesting.
With tiny amount of negative growth. Inflation's a little bit different to you because it looks as though we're just about getting it back under control. We're down.
Oh, that's great.
But the same pressures are there. And last year, in particular, was a very, very tough sales year.
Yes.
Particularly B2B. And the business that I'm involved in is selling into the training sector, as is your business. Okay. And now one of the first budgets to get cut or not to spend when things are tough is the training budget. We've had a number of people that are really keen to take on mentoring, really ready to just do it. But the funds that allow them to press the button and actually set it up just aren't there. And it's a tricky situation from a sales point of view, because it's not that the sales effort hasn't been put in to fill up the pipeline. It's people in that pipeline just can't press the button to make the final purchase.
So there's a few things there, isn't there? So Kevin and Graham, you would remember, I certainly do, maybe 10 years ago, when I was doing this, sales training, one of the issues that I used to find was that you'd have people achieving target because they were just high in activity levels. So they said, sales is a numbers game. Let's get out there. Let's just, sell to anything that moves almost. And they were, again, it wasn't about how good or how high quality their technique was, or their level of engagement, or the depth or the richness of their relationships, or anything like that. It was just purely on a numbers model, and they were successful. I can't even say that now. So you've got a deficit in activity levels and in skill levels. And when you're talking about the market that you've just described, Kevin, you need both, because you're going to have to maximize your chances for that future pipeline by pouring as much as you possibly can in the top. It's because more and more people are in that same situation that you've just described. So you either modify your product, which not everyone's able to do, or service, which not everyone is able to do, or you maximize your opportunities in a different way. And I would argue it has to be both activity and skill set technique. Yeah.
I get that completely.
It is. Yeah. I was talking to somebody yesterday about when I worked for the post office some years ago, 20 years ago, and basically we had something called the GDPL, and it's kind of like, it's the way in which L for letters, and so it kind of the sort of a modular effect of growth and decline, etc. The GDPL kind of was at the head of the curve and then behind the curve. So in other words, we're noticing, I'm noticing, providing direct mail services, is that I'm slightly ahead of the recovery, because people have started to think, I want to do more marketing. But actually, just as you're heading into a recession, people think, I'm going to cut marketing because I don't really need it. And at the end of the day, I wonder how similar in some way, whether it's a letters thing, but it was a fairly predictable model, and some really bright people, well, the brightest probably of the shining stars within the organization was doing that at that time. Right. But basically, it just seems to me that there's parallels with sales in some ways, that maybe sales kinds of selling kind of follows a similar path. It might not do, but it occurred to me the other day that maybe that's the fact maybe there's a fact as well that, sales performance dips as you're going into a recession, but improves ahead of you coming out. Don't know.
It could do. I think the other pattern that's similar to marketing is that, so with salespeople, and I'm finding this with one of my clients at the moment, they've just come off the back of an expo and they've done 1 month's worth of sales in a weekend, which is fantastic. But what it's created is a bottleneck in their follow-up process. So while they're busy following up all of the leads that they've created from this expo, they're not doing any new BD. So it's fantastic. It all sounds great, doesn't it? Oh, wow, a month's sales, fantastic. But a lot of them haven't got the discipline of being able to do both at the same time, which is what a lot of salespeople just are out of practice at doing, because the demand's always been there, so they haven't had to worry about it. But when you're creating your own demand, like you're describing, you often, you get into that BD mode, and then all of the leads come in, and then you're busy servicing the leads. And while you're servicing the leads, your next month's pipeline's going down because you're not creating anything new. And then you go, we're in a famine again, so we need to get out there and BD again. And you have this feast, famine kind of scenario, which, is a recipe for disaster. So, to smooth that out, there really needs to be an analysis of what's going on and how salespeople can operate in a different way or work a little bit smarter with marketing.
Obviously, as a woman, from a sales perspective now, my awareness of the people talk to me, many more female salespeople than when I was a lad. So basically, there was a few, and often they were brilliant, but they had to be. But now I think there's a lot more female salespeople. Is that your experience?
It depends on the industry.
Okay.
There's a lot more senior females. There's a lot less, unfortunately, there's a lot less male leaders in sales. You've either got, so you've got men who are kind of really, at the end of their careers. There's not a lot in the middle, and then there's some coming through. So there's some kind of, newbies. Gen Z, I'm really hanging my hopes on Gen Z. I just think that there's some really good signs from what some of the stuff that they're talking about. They seem very pragmatic. But yeah, there's a real gap. And I think, like a lot of other perhaps industries that haven't required people to have a formal education, they haven't required a degree as such. They tend to attract people who are really now-see, hardworking, really bright, quick at getting the hang of something. And then when they're good at it, there's the financial rewards there. And that's certainly, I think, lent itself to a lot of women returning to the workforce, perhaps after having children or whatever, and finding themselves in a place that they naturally have a good fit because they love people. They're really, wanting to engage. And I would love for more and more people to really see sales as a career. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, they see it as a stopgap or something that they'll do until, their real career kind of comes along.
Like being a finance guy like Kevin, But he should be a sales guy, Ingrid. There's something wrong with him.
Well, Kevin, I did have a quick look at your website, and I thought there's so much there that crosses over into, the traditional sort of sales landscape that I thought was just brilliant. So I think that you might be a closeted salesperson in there, and in a CFO's.
Well, he's closeted something or other. I don't know what it is.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah. But no, seriously though, finance people. It has been a career for you, Kevin. But I've not known you getting on. I think this is our 9th year, isn't it? So basically, I've known you for that time, and you're a very creative individual, and sales is. Ingrid's right. You're a kind of natural born salesperson because you're doing that with your Grow CFO.
That's interesting, Graham, because I naturally think of myself as not being a salesperson, and I'll veer away from sales.
Yeah, it's like a dirty word, isn't it, Kevin?
I suppose it comes from, and I know my strengths are about getting to know small group of people really well
Right.
and working with them to sort of fulfill their ambitions, which kind of lends itself better into the teaching and mentoring block. Now, I hate picking up the phone or starting a conversation with somebody I don't know. I've got a lot better at it over the years, but that's so I see myself in sales as probably more around getting to know the existing customers and probably a bigger role in retention than new sales.
But that's a beautiful description of what I would say is a very smart way. And because you're in that grow CFO space, that's very, very clever because that's where all of the profit is with our existing customers and getting to know them really well and understanding, and probably also, I would imagine in your space, preempting what they're going to need as well and building, that for them so that when they're ready, it's sitting there and you can provide that service as well. That to me is consulting, which to me is selling. And the love that you talk about your clients with, that to me is selling as well. And people often think about selling as cold calling, persuading, convincing people to buy something that they had no intention of buying in the first place, trickery, all of that stuff. And I think that they're all of the things that have contributed to people saying, oh no, I'm not a salesperson. Oh no, I don't do any selling, or oh no, I don't see myself like that. It's because I think it's become a dirty word, and I'd really love to change that.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you should. I don't think it is a dirty word. I think it's just it's a word that, because frankly,
Yeah,
no businesses exist without sales. So,
exactly.
but yeah, I don't know who said it, but everybody, I think it might be Dan Kennedy, but everybody in an organization can sell. There's only a
Yes.
few who can spend.
Right.
And that's the mantra. But and actually, you can all bring business in to a business, but you know. I think that's part and parcel. It should be part of everybody's contract. That whether you're on a machine or whether you're running the finance team, sales is part of your responsibility whilst you work for this company. But anyway, that's just my view of life. But I
No,
think
I love that, Graham. Because I really think that because this is the other issue. You know how we talked about marketing before.
yeah,
If you're really good at selling and you're a salesperson and you work really hard, especially now, imagine in this current context, you're working so hard, you do a great job, you've nurtured this relationship for months, maybe years, depending on the sector that you're in. You bring it in, it's converted, and then you hand it over to a project team or an implementation team or whatever that's not sales,
yeah,
and the experience is terrible. There's a real misalignment, a disconnect between the initial experience and what the customer's now getting. Or it might be that they've got a terrible experience with distribution, or had a terrible experience jumping through a million hoops to get some sort of finance situation happening. And what happens is it creates a lack of referral, from that customer. That's if they stay, and they feel like that they're obligated, they have to in some way, that maybe they're contracted to stay for a
yeah,
particular period of time. You're not going to get a referral out of it. The relationship's really hanging on by a thread with one person in the organization, as opposed to the entire organization itself, who loves that customer in a congruent way, regardless of what that touch point is or that connection part is. And then it affects that forward pipeline for the salesperson. Or let's just say that customer decides that they're not going to renew their contract or whatever. It's not going to be that person that gets the tap on the shoulder. It's going to come back to the salesperson, and they're going to be
yeah,
talked to in a way that says, how come you lost that client? How come you didn't do? What did you do? What didn't you do? And actually it's not necessarily them.
mm,
And you're absolutely right, everyone has a responsibility to, either if they're not directly involved with a customer, they're supporting someone who is. And they need to always remember that it's the customer, which is our whole reason for being. And without that customer, we belong to a club, or we belong to I don't know what you'd call it without revenue, because even clubs rely on membership fees. So, revenue is everything.
Somebody along your way, decided to call you the sales doctor. Now, doctor means something to many people, and presumably you get confused. People probably knock on your door. I've got this aching back. What can you do about it? But I mean, they missed the sales bit out. Just see the doctor. Was it your idea, or did somebody say, well, actually, you know what, Ingrid, you really should. You're like a sales doctor. Did something happen, or is it just marketing?
Look, it really is just marketing. And years ago, the reason I called it that was because I thought it's probably the best description to how I go about, my methodology, which is about the diagnosis first, the testing out, and then, prescribing a solution. But I really tried to stay away from, the cheesy kind of, let's do a checkup, and, let's do this, and, a health check or whatever. But it started as a blog because I really hated my other business, and I thought that would give me energy, and it didn't. And then I kind of reinvented it as my first love, which is coaching and training salespeople. So but I say that to my family, I'm almost a doctor. Listen to me, I'm almost a doctor.
They believe you, though, don't they? I mean, privately, I'm sure they.
Look, you should ask them. I'll go and get my husband and my son. Yeah.
Well, he can come in and join the podcast. He's always welcome. But he'll probably tell us the truth about you. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's why we don't want them anywhere near here.
So you obviously are well known throughout Australia. Do you work with businesses outside of Australia?
Not typically. I haven't, but I would absolutely love to. And I was speaking to Jen the other day. We caught up for breakfast, and she was saying that she's going to do some lunches over in the UK.
Oh, right.
And I said, it's a long way to go for lunch, Jen. But, she's
talking about free lunches, is Jen Stillwell, that's for sure.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I hope she's listening. Yeah.
She will be.
Yeah, good.
There'll be a legal letter coming through to me anytime soon. But no, seriously, I do think you would go down extremely well in other countries. I don't know. What do you think, Kevin?
I think so. Yeah, and fact is, you told us earlier you've been on Zoom virtually all day.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter these days whether the client's down the street, the other end of the country, or overseas.
It's really true, Kevin. I mean, gosh, for all of the horrible things that lockdowns brought, one of the good things out of it, especially for a business like mine, was Zoom, and the ability to kind of work across, an online forum. And I would have always said to you, oh, no, you can't get the same results on Zoom as you can in person. And while I think you can probably get about 90% in person is my preference, particularly when it comes to behavioural change. But a lot of my clients are still opting for that because it means that they don't have to fly there, especially, you know how big Australia is. You've got a national team. You got to fly them all on this massive country all into one place for an in-person. Then you got to, that's just the flights, which are really expensive, and then you've got to put them up for accommodation. Then it's the time away from selling, and it becomes quite a costly exercise, albeit a very good return. Yeah. But for some businesses, it's just not possible. So Zoom really ticks a lot of those boxes. It enables them to get access to something that they otherwise wouldn't be able to.
Absolutely.
Well, it opens up the world then, but I do think you're right, though, Ingrid. I think face to face has got to be, particularly in sales, because there's so much about how we go about our. I mean, next week I'm going down to London to see a new client, and we're planning to sit down together for, probably half a day and then dinner at night, etc. So, but by the time we're done, we'll properly know each other, and from my point of view, I'll have got all the evidence I need to help create the campaign that hopefully will make them a lot of money. So the whole idea of it is that you have that inside track that you don't always get chance. Even with a podcast, we probably might not ask a particular question that would really reveal something about you, because we just never got round to it. And so that might be, but in a face-to-face thing, you pick up on things a lot more. Even the room that they're in, just the little things that how they lay. I used to have a client in the mail order industry who put certain things in your eye line behind his head as a sort of he was testing you all the time. Brilliant fella.
Right.
Sneaky booker. He'd go well on any kind of sneaky film, or he'd be the sneaky guy. Totally sneaky, but he was senior. But the thing about it is that you'd learn so much from people's environments.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, 100%. And you can pick up the energy, when you walk into an office like you would, and you're trying to gauge all of the stuff that's unsaid.
Yeah.
The energy that you pick up from the way that the culture operates is something that you can't get on Zoom.
No, you can't. So I don't know if that's going to be the ultimately when it comes to your work and a bespoke business program that you'll deliver for people.
Yes.
Ultimately, there's I don't know what percentage culture and the way we do things around here would impact any kind of program that you provide. I mean, it probably has a massive impact, but it's difficult to sort of gauge, I guess.
It's difficult. It just takes longer. So you've got to engage with all of the different stakeholders. So if I was to work like I have, I mean, some of my clients I've only just met like the other week after 4 years, but and that's in Australia. But the engagement process is probably a little bit lengthier in order to kind of get the same stuff that you would be like. Imagine, like I'm hearing you in a day, you've captured it all.
Yeah.
And then you're on your way, you've got it all. Whereas that would probably be, quite a number of hours on Zoom with multiple people trying to kind of gather it all together. And I'm still going to not quite get some of that nuance. Yeah. Will it be enough to get a productive program together? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's just those little things that you just can't get without being in the same room.
If you had a magic wand, what would you do to if you could wander in a bit like Bewitched? You're probably too young to remember that, the woman.
Oh, please. I wish I was too young to remember that.
Well, anyway.
I can't wiggle my nose, though.
We could have an amusing a couple of minutes, couldn't we, Kevin, trying to guess her age? I mean, if we can't get that, we'll do it.
Don't go there, Greg. Do not go there.
No, all right, fair enough. But it's just a little waggle of the nose, and then something magical happen. What would it be if you wandered into an organisation? What would you want to be able to do?
I would really love people to. Well, first of all, I would love a CEO to really appreciate the value that their sales team brings to the organisation. Number one, and to see themselves as somebody who is a value driver within the business. That would be. If you had that, everything else follows.
It all follow. Yeah. Wow, that is a heck of an idea, and one that look, we could go on for hours, and we really should do, but the podcast will get cut in a few minutes. But today, Ingrid Maynard from the Sales Doctor, based in Australia, who should be marketing throughout the world in any time soon. Thank you for joining Kevin and I on the next 100 Days podcast.
Can I just say it's been an absolute delight, and thank you both so much for having me. It's amazing. So thank you.
So Graham, that really did highlight a problem, that you've got an economy that hasn't been great over the last couple of years, inflation that's been high, talent in short supply, and certainly that's not just an Australian phenomena. We've seen the Great Resignation. That makes it very, very tough to increase the top line, the revenue line in the business. I think Ingrid is onto some really great stuff there.
To be able to go into an organisation, having worked in sales organisations, to have somebody come in, first of all, is quite challenging, because we do it one way around here, and somebody comes in and challenges the way you're thinking and so forth. From Ingrid's point of view, good thing. From the salespeople's point of view, they're a bit wary. What does that mean for me? How does that change the way in which I'm perceived within their organization? Maybe it reveals to them how they're perceived in an organization. But, the one thing about how Ingrid helps is that she basically listens and listens to and researches where they are now across lots of different dimensions that she mentioned, and then talks to them about a program, which is why her testimonials on her website, which is thesalesdrfordoctor.com.au for Australia. Go there and you'll find all these testimonials from people who've used her services who just think she's brilliant. Well, they would be, wouldn't they? But it's the attention to detail and the sort of willingness to understand the context that the organization faces itself. And one of the biggest things in that context is people are setting high sales targets, and possibly unrealistic in an era when it's challenging out there.
Yeah, and it comes back to something I talk to people about all the time. That's targets of any sort, whether they're sales or whatever. And I think one of the worst things you can do is set the wrong target. You create either demotivation or the wrong behavior in people if you set the wrong target. Yeah. A huge sales target that people realize straight away they're not going to achieve just probably means they give up.
I've seen it, Kevin, and I've always, from day one in sales, I've always I wanted to be the best there is, and so I've always pushed myself to be that person in whatever organization I worked. I've worked in, and the important thing is that you're also observant of other people, especially if somebody's ahead of you in the sales rankings, etc. You want to understand what they're doing. Why can't you be better than they are? What are they doing that you're not, etc. But there's also a bunch of people who are coasting, and it's that this great resignation or this sort of, they're actually resigned, but they're still working there. In effect, they're just working to rule, as it were. Whoever set that rule is a nutcase. But at the end of the day, some people just don't, I don't know, for whatever reason, and it might be things at home or whatever it is, but they might not just know how, and therefore the sales doctor, Ingrid Maynard, can actually come along and help them. But why on earth aren't they pushing themselves to be the best they can be? I'll never know, because I'm just not cut that way.
No, quite. And I think you and I are similar from that point of view. Neither of us are gonna coast.
No.
But it's a tough old world out there.
Yeah.
And that huge target can certainly be demotivating. A target that's realistic and maybe a bit stretched, get people thinking about, well, okay, how do I get there? What do I do different? Target that might be even 50% more than a sensible stretch, just so people say, well, no, that's impossible. Switch off straight away.
Well, it leads to other things as well, which sandbagging or whatever. In other words, you've got a sale for next month, but you don't really reveal it until next month.
Yeah, that's right. You get all this sort of dysfunctional behavior going on if you get the wrong targets.
So if you can get over that type of behavior, then and actually almost say, hey, don't worry about it. We'll work out a way of whatever, taking the pressure off next month because you've done brilliantly this month. Just keep it flowing. It might, it's almost like, oh, here's a mini accelerator for you next month or whatever. But at the end of the day, there are ways to motivate people to bring in excellent performances. And I genuinely believe that Ingrid can set her stamp across the world, but certainly here in the UK, with organisations who are interested in selling more. All right, you might not see her every week, and she might not be over here in a month of Sundays, but on Zoom, she's going to be there for you. So, it's been an interesting podcast, Kevin.
Certainly has.
So today, I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.